In this episode of Getting to Know the TS27, I talk about the Afterlife, a first-time story, and Black Ops 3. But first, I want to talk to you guys about my podcast, LagCom Podcast. I stopped doing the highlights videos on my channel because they really weren't getting views and they took a lot of effort, so I just cut them out. I want to spend my time giving you guys, my audience, the content that you want to see. So that's why I didn't think that this was appropriate for me to do anymore. If you enjoy these type of videos, like the Q&A videos where I talk about my opinions on things and talk about real life shit, then you'll really enjoy the podcast. It's me, Eddie the Chump, Frito, and Skag3. Those are the hosts of the show. It's available on iTunes and other download mediums, so you can listen while you go. You don't have to sit there in front of the computer and watch the full 2.5 hours on YouTube. You could listen to it as it goes while you're doing homework or while you're at work or doing some other bullshit. Now, if you do already enjoy the podcast, we've started a Patreon page so that you guys can support the show and get some extra content. All the info is down in the description. Additionally, I did a recent crew cast with my gaming buddies on the Crew Gaming channel if you want to check that out as well, because we're talking even more in depth about Black Ops 3, Rock Band 4, and some other funny news. Additionally, I'm going to cut down the length on these type of getting to know videos because my last one was almost 40 minutes long and not that many people watch the full 40 minutes. I'm going to be making these videos more often, but they're going to be a bit shorter. So if you don't see your question answered in this video, I'll get to it another time. And as always, if you got a question for me, leave it down in the comments section. Now, on to the first question here from Black Eye Panda. I would like to ask, do you believe in afterlife, heaven/hell? Because my elderly friend Lucy died on Friday. I'm really sorry to hear about your friend's passing. And also, do you believe in ghosts/spirits? So let's get to the first part of your question. The short answer is no. Funnily enough, in college, I wrote a paper about this subject claiming that there was an afterlife. I took a college writing course which taught debate and thesis writing, which coincidentally is why I really enjoy doing LagCom podcasts, because a lot of it is debate and thought and insight and things that I learned in that class that I'm applying to real-life discussions. I wish I still had this paper, because it's from like 2003, because now I could rip the shit apart with the arguments that I've put forth in the paper. Anyways, back to the question. I don't believe in an afterlife. Until there is more evidence than just mediums who manipulate people. If you really want to know more about mediums, watch Penn and Teller's bullshit episode about it. It covers how mediums are crooks and a crock of shit really, really well. Much more so than I can do in this 10 or 15 minute video. I also need more evidence than claims about reincarnation and near-death experiences which fit into the stereotype that everybody knows already. I'm just not convinced. Most people, when they say about the afterlife, they cite NDEs as evidence because everyone's stories are so similar that they must be true. The problem is that the brain is an extremely powerful organ which is capable of tricking people into states of being that aren't actually there. It's pretty fascinating to think about, but it's also scary because you're never really actually in control. It has to do with the chemicals and the synapses of nerves, and everybody has a expectation of what heaven or an afterlife is already like because of how we were taught or how we were raised with with religious upbringing. So that kind of seed is already implanted in the mind, and your mind can manipulate your thoughts in such a way that makes it seem so realistic. Have you ever had a dream where it was so realistic you swore it actually happened? There are times that I have dreams about normal mundane things, and I go in the next day and I ask somebody about something which happened in my dream, and they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? That never actually happened. So that's why I'm not convinced that near-death experiences or the writings of how the process of reincarnation works is actually legit. So those were some of the arguments that I had put forth in my paper, which I still got an A on, believe it or not, but now I can just go back and tear it to shreds. So then your follow-up question is probably like, Schwantz, what do you think happens when we die? Since energy can't be created or destroyed, something has to happen, right? Well, I think that we turn our energy from our consciousness into energy that fosters animals or plants in order for them to gain energy. Basically, fertilizer. What I'm saying is our bodies will decompose and provide energy for whatever consumes us. So we start out with the energy between a sperm and an egg, and we finish off our kinetic energy by turning it into potential energy for other forms of being. Now, since we like to bury our dead in coffins, this process doesn't really quite happen, but in my mind, that's That's all there is to it. Until there's more evidence to the contrary, I'm not convinced. Now, for the second part of your question is really an extension of the first part. No, I don't believe in ghosts or spirits. Since there is no residual energy or soul that your body, quote unquote, inhabits, there's just no basis for a ghost or a spirit. Those, like, ghost hunter shows are really just silly shows for fun and entertainment, but scientifically speaking, it's just a bunch of bullshit. People will often claim that there's, electromagnetic energy spikes, in things, but there's electromagnetic currents in everything. Every single thing, living or not, has an electromagnetic current in it. So having an EKM spike isn't really that big of a phenomenon. So to me, even if there isn't an explanation for something happened to you, like in a personal story, that doesn't automatically mean that there is a ghost. This is the leap that I hate, is that since people can't explain something, the answer isn't, I don't know. The answer is this gigantic, ridiculous made-up thing of there's a ghost, there's a spirit, and all this stuff. So, to me, I'm okay with not knowing the answer. Some people, unfortunately, aren't, which blends into religion and all other sorts of stuff, but I'll stop it right there. On to the next one. Jab of Legend. Swans, have you ever tried a Caribbean/West Indian alcoholic beverage? And he lists a few here. Carib beer, which, yes, I did have. Banks beer, no, never tried it. Malibu, of course I've had Malibu. Mount Gay rum doesn't really ring a bell, but I did have Carib in college. When I was a sophomore, I had this wall of beers where basically I would go to the beer distributor. We have a beer distributor in my area that is one of the biggest beer distributors in the country. It has all sorts of micro brews from all over and also has lots of world beers. So what we would do is we would buy some beer, and then we would cut out one side of the box and tape the box to one of the walls in the apartment. So by the end of the year, our entire walls in our common area in our apartment was filled with beer boxes of all different types of beer. So I've had Carib, I have not had Banks. Malibu, of course, I've had, and rum is not really my thing. It's a little sweet for me. If I'm going for hard alcohol, I want something that doesn't really taste like anything. That's why vodka is my favorite. It doesn't taste like anything, it just burns when it goes down. I have, though, had Cruson rum in St. Thomas for my sister's destination wedding. So she had a destination wedding down in St. Thomas, and that's, I think, either on St. Thomas or St. Croix or St. John. One of those three of the U.S. Virgin Islands is where they have the Cruson rum factory. So there is that all over the place. I have actually a bottle of black cherry rum sitting right next to me now. Voiceless Gamer, story idea, first time. So for me, I'm going to do a first time story on the first time I've ever run away from home. And it's actually the only time I've ever, quote unquote, ran away from home. Me and my parents always had a good relationship. We were always very transparent with one another. And my parents got divorced when I was 11 or 12 years old, so I lived with my dad throughout most of my high school years and my later middle school years. So I had this friend who was a girl that lived in Nassau County. Now, I'm originally from Suffolk County on Long Island. This is going back almost like 15 or so years ago, that Nassau County and Suffolk County both had the same area code as 516. Then, all of a sudden, one year, that changed. Suffolk County got a different area code, 631, and Nassau County kept the 516 area code. So, I had this girl who was a friend that lived in Nassau County, and we used to talk on the phone all the time. Now that the area codes changed, my calls were considered long distance, even though this person lived 15 minutes away from me. So, I would obviously the first, couple of months after this change, I racked up huge phone bills, which my dad got unbelievably pissed off at me about it and demanded me that I stop speaking with this person. So eventually, I ended up communicating with them through phone calls, and I used to go on AOL Instant Messenger whenever I wanted to talk to them instead, because AOL Instant Messenger was free. Now, fast forward a couple of years, my brother, who, for all intents and purposes, wasn't quite as a social butterfly as I am, so it was hard for him to meet people, especially girls. So he would go into online chat rooms sometimes, and this is back before, like, Facebook. This was probably even, like, when MySpace was just starting. That we would make MySpace profiles and connect with other people through MySpace, right? So he got involved with this girl from New Jersey, which is an hour-and-a-half drive away over the Outer Bridge crossing, you know, from Staten Island. That's how far away this drive was. So my brother used to call her up on the phone, and that was an even longer distance, and my dad seemed to not care about the telephone bills. Now, of course, I would bring this up and be like, yo, Dad, double standard here. And he's like, well, your brother is more socially awkward than you are. Just cut him some slack. And I'm like, all right, fine. He's right. You know, your boy Schwantz is raking in all the bitches. I better lay off my little brother a little bit. Now, fast forward like maybe a month or two later, my dad drove him out to meet this. He's had never even met this person before. Meanwhile, the person that I was talking to on the phone is somebody that I considered a good friend, and we used to hang out all the time before the area code change, and I had to stop hanging out with this person that I considered a friend because it was costing too much in telephone bills. Yet, my brother, who was talking to this person from another state, my dad even offered to drive him out there to go and meet this person. And that is when I fucking snapped. When they got back later that night, I threw a shit fit. I cursed both of them out, and I got in my car because I was old enough to drive. I was 16, I think, at this point. I got in my car and I left, and I parked my car, and I slept in my car across the street from my girlfriend's house at the time, who lived in a pretty upscale, affluent neighborhood. So, surprise, surprise, 3 o'clock in the morning, I get a knock on the windshield and a flashlight in my face. It's 2 police officers because somebody in the neighborhood apparently was like, yo, there's this car outside, I've never seen it before, you police officers should go check it out. So then I explained to the cops what happened. I'm like, look, I had an argument at my house between me and my brother and my dad. I just wanted to get away and sleep in the car here. I'm not trespassing on anybody's property. I'm not breaking any laws. Leave me the fuck alone. Well, not in that many words, because believe me, I would have got my ass kicked. But the police officer said, you know what, why don't you go back home, and if you have a problem, here's, you know, my cell phone number, give me a call, and if there's a problem, then we'll come by and check it out later. And I'm like, fine, whatever. So I drove back to my house, and I slept in my basement that night, which was separate from my dad and my brother's room. So I told my dad that I was going over to my girlfriend's house, so he didn't really, he wasn't that worried about me because I told him, you know, I was staying out for the night because I was pissed off. So really, it kind of isn't running away from home, because if you run away from home, you run away and your parents don't know where you are. But this is the closest I ever had to running away from home, because like I said, I had a good relationship with my parents, so we were very transparent. So it's always important to talk to your parents about issues that you have with them, and they hopefully will understand where you're coming from. No parent really wants to have their kid go missing or not know that their kid is safe or in good hands. So that is the end of my story. Unfortunately, it's not as cool as, you know, I ran away from home, hitchhiked across 3 states, got picked up, but no, nothing crazy like that. Next question is from Fruiak Wilkford. I hope I pronounced that correctly. What are your expectations for Treyarch's Call of Duty 2015? It's almost certainly going to be Black Ops 3. It is. Very surprised if it was World War II. It's not. Do you think they will at least attempt to better the game's connection status? What the fuck else would they have gotten done given the 3 years that they had? You know what I'm saying? For me, Treyarch games have always had shitty hit detection and connections. If there was not a beta for this game, I wouldn't have thought twice about not getting it, because I haven't liked any of Treyarch's Call of Duty games. None of them. But I will try the beta, because it's free. Fuck it. Why not? However, I think it's going to be difficult for them to get hit detection down unless they enlist help from like Sledgehammer Games or Infinity Ward. Just be like, yo guys, can you give me some of that hit detection code? We don't want to reinvent the wheel over here. Can we share some of this shit, please? I mean, to think that they don't share the code for this engine is kind of preposterous. So I'm just mystified on how Treyarch games always have shitty hit detection and netcode. I do think because the Call of Duty engine is so old, gameplay mechanics problems are almost inevitable, but the now-gen hardware can handle things much better than in the 360 or the PS3. Advanced Warfare's hit detection is pretty good for me because, one, I live near New York City and I'm on a dedicated server most of the time that I play, and two, I play it on the Xbox One, and there are better server and connections on the Xbox One than there are in the 360, just going from my own personal experience. If Black Ops 3 has dedicated servers and they get some netcode help, especially with it not being on last gen, or at least they don't have to worry about the last gen port of the game, it's very optimistic to say the least. But again, there's going to be a beta, so we'll try it out. So he's got a second part here, which isn't really a question, but I'm going to respond to it anyway. I do think you underrated Black Ops 2 for the game's movement. The game's movement didn't fucking work on the last-gen systems. There were camera angle issues, there were player model issues, the hit detection was piss poor. I think that game was too fast for the code underneath it, or the Call of Duty infrastructure, if you will. The graphics are whatever. The graphics don't really, I don't care about the graphics in a game, more or less. The gameplay, like I said, I had all sorts of gameplay mechanics problems for me. The game didn't really function that well, which is why I despised that game. That game was the most frustrating Call of Duty to me, because on paper, it is a perfect Call of Duty game, but in execution, it just fell up short on so many fronts. And sound, come on now. You couldn't even hear fucking footsteps in Black Ops 2. What the fuck you talking about, sound? The sound in that game was awful. And then he goes on here, shitty-ass hit detection, shitty-ass matchmaking algorithm, shitty-ass servers. So those are all things that I agree with. I don't understand why Call of Duty developers find the need to implement a skill-based matchmaking system into a casual playlist. The game, Call of Duty, doesn't take that much skill to play. After playing games like Battlefield, where there's a lot more recoil on the guns, and CSGO, which is a game that's made for competitive, Call of Duty is a joke. And finally, because this is getting a bit long here, Era Black with the last question. What do you think about the joining mid-game feature? I hate it. I always get into lobbies where my team is getting raped and the score gap is so huge that there is no possible way to make a comeback. So here's my devil's advocate for you, Era Black. Put the shoe on the other foot. What if you are the guy having a fucking amazing game? You're teeing off on enemies and they're leaving left, right, and center over here so that there's only one fucking guy on the enemy team. How the hell is that fair to you? Don't you want more players to connect to the game so that you continue your beast-ass game instead of just having 5 or 6 guys running around trying to kill one fucking random dude? That's the trade-off here. You always have to think about it in both contexts. And yes, I do not like getting put into games where the score is like 10 to 130. But you know what? I'll stay in the rest of the game. I'll take my fucking lumps. And the next game, when the lobby fills up, inevitably it will, then I will beat the ass of the people who just, played really well last game. What they should do is what Titanfall did in one of their patches, where if you join a game late and your team is losing, it doesn't count against your stats. That, I think, helps both situations. Your stats don't get clobbered because there's absolutely nothing you could do about the game that you just joined, and people will refill the lobby so that this way there aren't lopsided games after the first couple minutes. So that's my counter to that. I don't mind the joining mid-game feature because if I'm ever teeing off like Rory McIlroy and having a sick game and everybody leaves, I'm going to be pissed off at those people if they fucking left. So that's just me. So there are more questions that I have here, but I will get to them next time. And if you have a question for me, make sure you leave it down in the comments section. Hope you enjoyed this episode of getting to know the TS27. Out like a boner in sweatpants. Until next time.